Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today I'm going to show you how to plant leafy greens. They're your cool weather crops. I'll talk about cool weather crops, the temperatures that they like. We're going to get an endive, loose leaf lettuce, red and green varieties. We'll also do spinach, and I'll show you also how to direct seed. We'll talk about the spacing. So I'm going to get this bed set up. I will link a video that shows you how to set up your raised beds with different soils. That will be future videos. Please subscribe for 2023, and I will teach you how to grow an entire vegetable garden. I start in January with growing plants indoors, then I plant the cool crops, warm crops, and then cool crops again in the fall, and everything in between with organic sprays, pest control, disease management, tending, and all kinds of tips and tricks just to help you have a better vegetable gardening experience. So please subscribe, and let's get started with planting your leafy greens. For planting your cool crops, going from the summer when it's warmer into the fall, it's the end of September now, you can really just leave your soil as it is. I had to add more into here because it kind of sunk down. Again, subscribe and I will show you how I fill raised beds come 2023. I do that every year. You just want to loosen up the soil a couple inches deep. We're not adding any organic granular fertilizer right now. You could if you want to, but this bed has really been prepped over the summer. There's plenty of nutrients in here, and we're going to water these plants in with a water-soluble fertilizer like fish emulsion or AgroThrive, which you can find in my video description. Water-soluble fertilizers will provide nitrogen immediately to the plants that they can use, and that's really what you want for your leafy greens, nitrogen to get great leaf growth. So basic setup is I started these maybe 6 weeks ago in cells, and you just pop them out and set them up like this. If you have two seeds growing or two plants growing next to each other, you can just divide right down the middle. You'll end up with two plants. And that's what I did over here. They're really hardy. You just tear it right down the middle. That's plenty of root system for the plants to be okay. You just want to keep them watered, let these roots establish, and these are going to take off. So I have endive here. Pop them out of the cell. Just loosen them up really gently, and in fact, you can be harsh. You don't have to be over cautious with your plants. You're going to just drop the root ball in right to the same level here and press it in. And that's all you have to do. If a leaf gets broken like this one, we're just going to toss it. Here's a red loose leaf lettuce. Now the loose leaf lettuces kind of grow like this. They don't really spread out that much. I have these spaced and 6 or 8 inches. I don't really measure except through by my eye. If you want to space these 6 to 8 inches apart, you can grow these to full size. That will give them enough room. When we get to the seeds, I'll show you how to plant them more closely, and maybe you only want these to get to half the size and you cut them for smaller greens so you can pack them in more closely. But if you want a full head of lettuce, this is loose leaf, you're going to want to give them 6 to 8 inches in space in between each row, between each plant, and maybe 8 inches between there. You don't want these plants to get large and overcrowd, or there's not really good air circulation, but more importantly, snails and insects get in there, hide under the leaves, damage the plants. If you leave enough space when you're growing to a full head, birds can drop in here, find snails, slugs, problematic insects. So this is how I would set up the transplants for growing to full size, and that's all you really have to do. Same thing with seeds. I would just put a hole, let's just do it real quick, maybe like that, 1/4 inch deep, drop in 2 or 3 seeds. You never want to just put in one seed and be waiting around for it to germinate. Put in some extra, remove them if you want to, and then you just cover it over. Again, really simple. Just take this, plant it to here. There are 2 lettuces in here. I'm going to leave that. Maybe I just cut this one before it gets to size. And that's how I would set the transplants up, or seeds spacing wise, for full-size heads. Now keep in mind, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 plants here. If these all get to size at the same time, you have to think about how much lettuce can I eat at once. So generally speaking, I'm always just taking a couple leaves, cutting a plant back, leaving the roots in the ground. It'll regrow leaves, and that's how I harvest my lettuces and greens for salads. So what are cool weather crops? Well, just as their name says, they like the cool weather. The key though is most of your cool weather crops can take a frost, and sometimes even a heavier freeze. So the leaves can freeze through, they thaw when the sun comes out or the temperature's warm, and they don't get damaged. They continue to grow. They just love the cool temperature. Generally speaking, if you're looking for planting times, when the nights are staying in the 50s, 50 degree Fahrenheit regularly, and the days are staying in the 70s, that's a pretty good time to plant your seeds and your transplants for the cool weather crops. That's more ambient temperature. That's the surrounding temperature, 50-degree nights, 70-degree days. They like when the soil temperature is in the 50s, 60s, where it's staying cool. The cool roots tell the plant everything is fine, and they just slowly grow beautiful leaves. When this soil really starts to warm up into the 80s and 90s, it sends a signal to these plants to bolt, which means it sends up a flower stalk, it stops growing leaves, the plants can get bitter, and that's why when you're going from spring, late winter into later spring, early summer, and the heat is coming in, you can no longer grow your cool weather crops. Basically, it gets too hot, they just don't do well. You put in your summer crops or your warm crops, and then you come back again in the fall and you have another round of cool weather crops, and that's what we're doing here today. When it gets to the point, if this was in the ground, when your ground starts to freeze really deeply like this, and the stem where it connects into the root system freezes solid, that's usually when your cool weather crops start dying off. So if you have a good 60 days before that heavy freeze comes and freezes the soil, you can plant your lettuce now, you can plant spinach now, you can plant endive, arugula, kale, all kinds of different plants. All right, let me get these in and then we'll get to planting the seeds. The bottom line is really 6 to 8 inches, maybe 10 inches of spacing if you want to grow your leafy greens to full size, and that's really for lettuces, endive, and spinach. So we come over to the planting hole, which I did explain, but I just want to show you. So looking right in here, there are two spinach seeds in there. I've already put the seeds in. That's kind of boring to watch. But again, about 6 or 8 inches, and that's how I would set up spinach or lettuce if I wanted to get the full heads. If I want to, harvest this maybe smaller, when it's 3-4 inches tall, I put them 2 or 3 inches apart in a row, and maybe 3 or 4 inches in the space there. You don't have to be exact, but that's the general pattern. If I'm growing these not quite to full size, maybe 4 inches, I would cut them, remove them, leave the roots in, and they're going to keep coming back. And the reason I do that is I want to start harvesting lettuces and spinach and greens for salads as quickly as I can. I don't want to have to wait 40 or 60 days for mature plants. So in about 20 days from germination, if you plant a lot of the leafy greens, you can just take leaves and you can start having your salads. So these are full with spinach seeds, and I would just cover them over or water them in a minute with the fish emulsion. I just want to show you how much to use. Other leafy greens or cool weather crops that you can grow in October are arugula. I'm going to put some of that in right in here. It will mature really quickly. In about 25 days from germination, you can have arugula. I also like pak choi. It's a fast-growing Chinese cabbage. Radishes you can put in just about any time. They take about 25 to 30 days to mature. And mustard greens. Now mustard greens get really tall, and they are a little bit spicy. When you saute them down, they lose that spiciness. So I don't always really put these into salads because sometimes they're too strong. But these plants will get 18 inches tall, so I always plant them with a good 6 inches in between. And again, I would put in 2 or 3 seeds, thin them down to 1 once they get about a ½ an inch high. For the arugula, and that's what I'm going to put in there is the mustard greens. For the arugula, I'm always cutting this down pretty quickly. So I'm doing 1 every, 2 inches or something like that. 2 or 3 seeds in there, and I leave in for arugula 2 or 3 seeds because it just grows really quickly, and I'm using it all the time in sautés, in salads, and such. But the spacing, I'm keeping 6 or 8 inches between here. Again, enough space so that the plants can grow, do well, but also so that birds can get in here and kind of look for snails and slugs. Just a quick tip, if you have onions that survived from the summer that you didn't harvest or they were small, I take them out of the ground and then I just put them really closely together where my salad garden is going or my greens garden is going. They will send up shoots. The bulbs aren't going to get much bigger, but you can cut these and use them in salads and in sautés. All right, let's get to fertilizing. I'm using fish emulsion today. Again, it's a water-soluble fertilizer, and that means the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium are going to be immediately available to your plants, and that's what you want for the leafy greens. They like nitrogen. So at planting, just follow whatever instructions you're using for your water-soluble, and it's a quick soak. You don't need to put a whole gallon on each of these. This is a 2-gallon container. It's probably enough to do all these plants and then some, and I'm just going to do a feeding right when I put the transplants in, and then maybe I'll feed these again in 10 to 14 days if they need it, but that's all they're gonna need. And then you just want to keep these watered, depending on your temperatures, anywhere from 2 to 4 times a week, because sometimes it still gets hot. Going from summer into fall, you might still get an 80-degree day, and you just don't want these to dry out. Your leafy greens are like 80–90% water. For the plants that I started as seeds, I just give them a quick soaking. Now after I put in the fish emulsion, I will come over with a hose and I will really soak down this whole space. It's really important to keep your seedlings watered well, especially when you're going again from the summer into the fall, because if it gets really hot, the top inch or two is going to dry out pretty quickly. So again, be watering these plants every couple of days. Again, your leafy greens are really mostly water, so keep them watered well and they should do well, especially as that cool weather rolls in. You're going to love the fall garden. Please subscribe. I'll be doing more videos on cool weather crops throughout October. And if you follow me in 2023, I really do about 150 videos a year, all in real time, and you can kind of just follow along and do what I do in my garden to keep your garden hopefully growing well. I'm in Maryland Zone 7. If you are more north, you may have to wait a couple of weeks before you get started, and if you're down south, you may be able to start a little bit earlier, but you can use my videos as a guideline. Thanks for watching. Please check out my seed shop at therustedgarden.com.